Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the America's Founding Series on the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today because I have a remarkable story to tell you, and this is of Jordi Mesquida, a Hispanic whose efforts in the American Revolution do not go unnoticed. He was someone that had an unwavering belief in liberty, and it compelled him to make sacrifices and sacrifice almost everything: his name, his homeland, even his physical well-being, for the birth of a nation that wasn't even formed yet. He wanted to fight for a chance at freedom. And his journey spans across continents. It weaves through war-torn battlefields, vibrant port cities, and ultimately he'll end up in the American colonies. He was always driven by this unshakable goal to uphold the ideals of liberty that he fiercely embraced. And when we look at Jordi Mesquida, born on the Spanish island of Menorca, which is in the Catalonian region, it seemed like it was his destiny to live on the seas. He became a merchant marine. You're on an island surrounded by water, so it kind of makes sense, right? And as a skilled mariner, he roamed far and wide. Fate would carry him further than maybe even he ever imagined. It would carry him all the way to the bustling port of New Orleans. Now, New Orleans at the time was Spanish Louisiana. It was under the control of Governor Luis de Unzaga, and history often overlooks the crucial yet understated role that Unzaga played in supporting the American Revolution. Perhaps that may be a good idea for a future episode, so stay tuned to that. But I want to focus on Jordi because picture a young Spaniard, fresh from the old world, coming to the city where you see all these different influences: French and Creole, Spanish, the vibrant tapestry of commerce, music, culture, and foods. When they tell you that our country just simply was just rich old white men, it couldn't be further from the truth. We were diverse from the start. And something that Jordi may not have realized at the time was that the winds of revolution were blowing through the British colonies. Soon those winds would draw him into the powerful current. Word of the colonists' fight for independence, it pierced the Spanish territory. And for Jordi, it was more than political news. The idea of self-governance resonated with him. He felt summoned to be an active participant as history is unfolding rather than being a bystander to it. So to demonstrate his unbreakable commitment to the patriot cause of independence, he decided to change his birth name. And this is a bold statement. So Jordi, according to Catalonians, translates into George. And he became known as George Farragut. Now, while a lot of people would shift their allegiance and took the bold step of fighting for the patriot cause, how many of them would actually renounce their birth name and adopt a new name? But this act was more than just symbolism. It showed his dedication and willingness to the cause of independence, to leave everything he once knew behind, and to create a new life, stake his entire future on the dream of American liberty. And once he set his sights on this course, there was no turning back. He quickly joined the South Carolina Navy as a lieutenant. And obviously he had the experience given his maritime prowess honed in the Mediterraneans, and now his role was to safeguard colonial shores and to disrupt the British supply lines. Understand, these supply lines were a crucial component to the war effort. Britain obviously had more training, their troops were better armed, they were better equipped, they were obviously better financed. But there's a real battle. The true test of this mettle would come in the thick of a battle. And it was June of 1776, where we start to see a turning point. This is the pivotal battle of Sullivan's Island. The British, they were overconfident in their naval capabilities, in their naval might. And I could understand why. They were the more dominant military force. If we run the simulations today, You put in all the variables that existed at the time of the American Revolution, and Britain wins the American Revolution 99 times out of 100. There was only a very small chance that we would actually win. So the British Navy launches a major counteroffensive, and it was aimed at the strategic harbor of Charleston. Farragut was stationed among determined patriots, and they were facing relentless cannon fire. The roar of guns echoing throughout the waters, each volley threatening to unravel this rebellion. Remember, we weren't seeing a lot of battlefield successes at the time, and the battle for independence actually looked grim at this point. But in the chaos, something even worse happens to George. A British cannonball tore brutally through Farragut's arm, shattering his bone, his flesh. Now, war is brutal, and this is a reminder of how brutal war could be. You don't like it, don't go to war. But wars come at a grave cost. Freedom isn't free. And witnesses at the time recount how even while George was gravely injured, his arm dangling, he urged his fellow patriots to hold their ground. You know, at the time, they didn't have real surgeons, real doctors. They did what they could, but his arm was never going to be the same. It's not like today where you may have a chance of full recovery. With an injury like this, during 1770s and 80s, you're not recovering. Full recovery isn't a realistic option. I want everyone to think about that for a second. This was a devastating injury. What left did he have to prove? He obviously showed his bravery. He showed the courage he possessed. He sacrificed for the cause of independence. It would have been so easy for him to take a step back from the front lines and say, I did my part. I played my role. I made the sacrifice. And he could have just enjoyed the rest of his life. But that's not what he did. That's not what he wanted. This only reinforced his resolve. Despite the constant pain he was in, Farragut would remain. He would remain in the military, and he would remain steadfast in his devotion to liberty and the idea of self-governance. And his continued presence on ships and in Navy strategy meetings underscored the extraordinary power of will over the circumstances he found himself in. It shows you he was driven. Throughout his career in the Navy, he actively would defend key ports and battles to further the cause of liberty, even though the colony's chances of success were actually slim. And while the lingering effects of his shattered arm obviously presented challenges to him, he persevered. And his physical sacrifice was a constant reminder of what he was fighting for. Unfortunately for him, war is not like it's something that's linear. And by 1780, Charleston would fall. And unfortunately for Farragut, him, many others were taken into British captivity. Now imagine, you have this devastating injury from a cannonball, and now you're faced with being held captive by the British. You have no idea what they're going to do to you, what captivity is going to look like. Do you think maybe he was regretting his decisions? Do you think maybe he was saying, I should have got out when I can? But that's not George. Because for George, the spirit of independence would refuse to yield. His unwavering dedication to liberty would outlast him being a captive of the British. And it really is remarkable. We recounted how George Farragut, previously known as Jordi Mesquida, fought bravely for the Patriot cause. His shattered arm, courtesy of British cannon fire, was a testament to the personal sacrifices that fueled our struggle for independence. And he wasn't the only one. It's just that today we're highlighting him. But his arm served as a constant reminder of the struggle for independence throughout the rest of his life. And his story did not end on the battlefield. When the guns finally went silent and peace was declared, he was released from captivity. And he was released into a new nation that was forged from the fires of revolution. His sacrifices did not go unnoticed. And while he bared the permanent mark of war, his spirit remained unbreakable because he had a profound belief in the promise of freedom, a sense of optimism in all that America has to offer. That's when he set his sights on the open frontiers and Farragut moved westward to Tennessee. Now, this was a land that wasn't developed at the time. This isn't, Virginia, New York, New Jersey, Boston. It's none of that. Tennessee was untamed wilderness, and to him, it symbolized the limitless horizons of a new nation. It was on the frontiers that he began to lay down his roots here in the United States, and he began to raise a family. And when he was raising his children, he passed on the values that he fought so fiercely for. Among his children was David Farragut. Now, David was destined to become one of America's most renowned naval heroes. In fact, David would go on to become the first rear admiral, the first vice admiral, and the first admiral in the United States Navy. And I want everyone to think about that for a moment. The first admiral of the United States Navy was half Hispanic and half Scotch-Irish, but he was all American. Think about how remarkable that actually is. Think about what America stands for. Not for nothing. But you could go to any other part of the world. You could live in those countries for years. You could become citizens in those countries. But if you go to Japan and gain Japanese citizenship, you're never going to be considered Japanese. You're never going to be considered Chinese. You're never going to be considered Saudi Arabian or Italian or Spanish. We are the only country where no matter where you come from, you will be considered American once you gain your citizenship. And while David's maritime triumphs would overshadow his father's story, George's legacy is a testament to the resilience and the courage that shaped both the man and our great nation. His permanently injured arm is going to serve as a silent symbol of his courage that so many people seem to lack today. The story of George shows our rich history, how complex it really is, where people from all different backgrounds converged on our shores to forge a new nation. Despite what's taught in schools, it wasn't just a bunch of rich old white men that created this nation. That has always been a myth. That is not the truth. That is not real American history. Like so many forgotten patriots of the Revolutionary era, Farragut's journey highlights how liberty, once it's kindled, can really galvanize people from all corners of the globe. And George represents how individuals rise up. They're not observers. They're not bystanders, but they serve as catalysts that would embrace a new cause that would come to define his life, and ultimately it would change the course of history. A cause that he was willing to bleed for, a cause that he was willing to bear the scars for. And he was willing to die for that cause because he deemed the principles of independence, liberty, and self-government as universal. That this is what life is about. This is what makes life worth living. So when we look from his presence in New Orleans under the administration of Governor Luis Gonzaga, to his arm being blasted by a British cannonball, to being a prisoner of the British during the Revolutionary War, his story shows the lesser known people that add a complex international dimension of the Revolutionary War. Not just that France and Spain helped finance it. It shows that our history is not as simple as people make it out to be, that it's complex. And for now, we need to remember George, because this forgotten patriot, we've done him a disservice. Most Americans never heard of him. And George Farragut stands as a testament to the revolutionary spirit and the extraordinary lengths real people went through for the ideals that, let's face it, many of us today take for granted. And as we wrap up this episode, we should always honor the liberty we inherited and the people who bravely helped secure it, whether it's through blood or the sacrifices they made. Regardless if history gives them their due or not, we will give them their due here on the America's Founding series. It's the due they deserve. They deserve to be recognized for their contributions to our great country. And if you found the content of this episode informative, do me a favor. take 30 seconds, write a good review on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating on any podcast platform that allows it. And I want to thank Dr. John D. and Greg Kaufman for their very kind words. I appreciate it. I always love reading your feedback. So keep on sending the feedback. Keep it coming. And listen, the America's Founding series, it's a way to remind people that freedom is never free. It's paid for by the sacrifices of those who believed and committed their lives to the cause and defense of liberty. And that's why I encourage you to share this episode with other people. Help others rediscover the remarkable men and women who helped build this nation. We need people to start appreciating the United States again. Too many have fallen victim to believe that our government is the country and the country is the government. That isn't even remotely true. And so share this episode with others so we could spotlight some of these great forgotten patriots. Thank you for tuning in to this installment of the America's Founding series on the P.A.S. Report podcast. I have great episodes lined up for next week that you're not going to want to miss. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com. And follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.